When the phone rang that night, I almost didn't pick up, but something in me knew whose voice was waiting. "Greta," he said, so casually it made my skin tighten. I sold the cabin, finally did something useful with it. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was the last thing my father built with his hands before he died, the only place that still felt like him. I waited for an apology, or even a pause. Instead, my stepfather laughed, a dry, careless sound that told me what I'd known for years. In this family, my love meant nothing unless it could be used. I'd forgiven their selfishness before, their silence, their small cruelties dressed as jokes. But this was the line that split something open in me. That night, I stopped being the quiet one who endured. They didn't know it yet, but the life they'd built on my silence was about to collapse, one truth at a time. Snow pressed against the hospital windows that night, muting the city into a kind of frozen hush. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed faintly, the only sound left after hours inside the operating room. I peeled off my gloves, the smell of antiseptic still clinging to my skin, when my phone began to vibrate on the metal tray beside the instruments. Martin Reddick. His name lit up the screen, cutting through the quiet. I hadn't seen it in months, but my body reacted before my mind could. An instinct carved by years of uneasy peace. I hesitated, then answered. His voice came bright and casual, as if he were telling me about the weather. He said he'd sold the cabin in Vermont, said it had been sitting there too long, collecting dust, said it was time someone did something useful with it. The words didn't land all at once. They slid under my skin, sharp and slow, until every beat of my heart felt like it hit something metal. The cabin. My father's hands had built it, board by board. He had read by that window every night, his voice soft when he told me that peace was something you fought to keep. Martin kept talking, his tone light, almost cheerful. There was a laugh in there, a hollow, careless sound that splintered the air. I didn't answer. I simply ended the call, the phone heavy in my palm, heavier than any scalpel I'd ever held. I walked out into the empty hallway, the floor shining under harsh white light. Outside, Boston's winter sky glowed above the rooftops, the kind of cold that reaches the bone. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the small silver compass my father had given me years ago. The needle quivered, steady on north. I stared at it until the hallway blurred. Somewhere between that steady needle and the silence around me, I realized what had just been taken couldn't be bought back, and that the world I'd kept holding together for everyone else had finally cracked open. The morning after the call, I dialed my mother. Once. Twice. On the third try, she finally answered. Her voice carried that same practiced calm I'd known my whole life, the kind that pretended to smooth over everything while slicing a clean line right through me. "Don't make this bigger than it is. Greta," she said. "Martin's just trying to keep things afloat. He had debts to settle. You don't even need that cabin anymore. You're in Boston. It's in Vermont. What would you possibly do with it?" For a second, I couldn't speak. That sentence, "You don't even need it," wasn't just about the cabin. It was about everything she'd ever decided I didn't deserve to keep. The air around me felt smaller, as if I'd stepped into a room that no longer belonged to me. I hung up and drove to my old apartment, the one where boxes from another life still waited in the closet. I pulled them down, one after another, until I found the folder that still smelled faintly of cedar and paper dust. Inside, beneath insurance forms and medical notes, was the document I hadn't seen in years, my father's original inheritance contract. The ink had faded, but the handwriting was steady enough to feel like his voice again. At the bottom, in blue, was a note I'd never noticed before. Property may never be transferred without Greta's notarized consent. My throat tightened. He had known. Somehow, he had seen this coming and tried to protect what little he could. A father writing to a future he wouldn't live to see. Relief and heartbreak collided until I couldn't tell one from the other. Proof that I was right, and proof that he had feared exactly this day. I called my mother again. When she picked up, my voice was calm, too calm. "You signed it, didn't you? You helped him sell it." There was a long, empty pause, long enough for the ticking of my wall clock to grow unbearable. Please don't push this further, she said softly. Martin was only trying to help. Help! The word felt like a bruise pressed too hard. I ended the call and sat there in the quiet, listening to the clock echo through the apartment. Each tick felt like a lie I'd swallowed too many times to count. That was the moment it hit me. Not just what they'd taken, but who they decided I didn't need to be. I had lost my mother once when my father died, and that morning, I lost her all over again. Memory doesn't arrive politely. It crashes in, uninvited, when you least expect it. For me, it came as the smell of roasted turkey and the clinking of silverware. 22 years old and sitting at a table that was supposed to mean family. Martin raised his glass that night. His smile stretched too wide. To Greta, he said, our resident genius, chose medicine over business, won't make much. But at least she can save a few poor souls, right? Laughter rippled through the room, thin and awkward. I remember the heat rising up my neck, my mother staring at her plate as if silence could make her invisible. My father didn't argue. He just rested his hand on my shoulder, his thumb brushing once, the way he always did when he wanted me to stay steady. After dinner, I escaped to the porch. The cold bit at my hands, but the quiet was a relief. A few minutes later, my father joined me, carrying a small wooden box. Inside was a silver compass. The metal caught the porch light, gleaming faintly as he pressed it into my palm. Not everyone will understand the path you chose, he said. But you do, that's what matters. Keep this. It will remind you where your true north is. He died a few months later, and that compass became the only thing that still felt like him. Simple, unshakable, and steady when everything else tilted. Now, years later, I sat in my Boston apartment with that same compass in my hand. The needle trembled slightly, catching a shaft of light from the window. It cast a faint reflection on the wall, an accidental pattern shaped like the letter V. I watched it flicker there and felt something stir deep inside me. V for Vermont, for the place I had left behind, for the truth still waiting to be uncovered. The memory of that Thanksgiving burned differently now. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a blueprint. The man who mocked, the woman who stayed silent, and the daughter who learned how pain could sit quietly until it finally stood up. And this time, I wasn't going to sit still. The air in the cafe was thick with roasted beans and rain, the kind of Boston morning where the city felt half awake. Amanda sat across from me, her hair pulled back, eyes scanning the stack of papers I'd placed between us. She didn't speak for a while. Then her brow lifted. Just slightly. The way it always did when she saw something that didn't fit. This isn't a family misunderstanding, she said, her voice quiet but sure. If that property was sold without your notarized consent, it's fraud. The word landed heavier than I expected. Fraud. It didn't sound like family anymore. It sounded like a case file. I told her everything. The call, my mother's voice, the contract with my father's handwriting at the bottom. Amanda turned each page with the precision of someone dissecting a lie. When she finally looked up, her expression had shifted from curiosity to strategy. Then we plan. Operation True North, she said. You need to find your direction again. I'll make sure the law finds its way, too. The name hit me somewhere deep. True North. My father's phrase. A reminder that when all maps burn, you still have the sky. 2 weeks later, Amanda called just past midnight. I could hear typing in the background, the distant hum of her desk lamp. Greta, she said. I found something. The buyer isn't a stranger. It's Clarissa Reddick. My heart froze. Martin's daughter, the one who used to roll her eyes whenever I visited, calling me the serious one. Amanda's voice sharpened. She owns a brokerage, Redleaf Realty. The sale was made under her company's name. It's not a purchase, it's a cover. They're laundering money through the property. The words fit together too perfectly, like the final snap of a puzzle I'd been trying not to finish. I pictured Martin smiling, that same self-assured smile, Clarissa watching beside him, a family built on my father's ashes. I took a slow breath, the calm kind surgeons use before a critical incision. Let's begin, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I performed surgery the next morning, my hands steady while my mind carved through something else entirely. Every incision felt like a vow, to cut out what was rotten, to leave only what could heal. 3 nights later, I drove to Vermont. The road was long and empty. snow melting into streaks of black ice. When I reached the lake, lights flickered through the trees. The cabin stood there, glowing like a stranger's house. Music drifted through the cold air, soft jazz, careless laughter. A new sign hung at the gate. The Reddick Lake Estate, luxury lakeside retreat. My father's home, now dressed up as someone else's triumph. I walked in through the open door as if I belonged there. The air smelled of cedar polish and expensive perfume. Clarissa stood near the fireplace, surrounded by investors in tailored coats. Her blonde hair was swept high, her lipstick a bright, confident red. When she spotted me, her smile flickered before snapping back into place. "Well, Greta," she said smoothly. "Long time no see. Come to take a look around?" I let my eyes wander over the walls. The photographs my father had framed were gone, replaced by glossy abstracts with meaningless titles. The old rocking chair where he used to read was missing, too. The cabin had been gutted, its memory stripped for market value. I asked her quietly if she knew my father had once called this place the Stronghold. Clarissa laughed, light and dismissive. "Now it's the Reddick Lake Estate," she said. "Things change. They have to, if you want them to make money." The words stung less than the pride in her voice. I didn't answer. Instead, I lifted my phone and began taking photos. Corners, beams, the new fixtures, every trace of what they'd stolen. Proof, not revenge. When I turned to leave, Clarissa's tone dropped, almost friendly. "You won't win," she murmured behind me. "People like my father, they trust him. They like him." I stopped at the door, facing the reflection of her smile in the glass. "When the truth speaks," I said, "no one needs to be liked." Outside, the sky was bruised with rain. I started the car and drove without music. The cabin lights faded behind me, swallowed by the trees. My phone buzzed once on the passenger seat. A message from Amanda. "Martin just mortgaged the cabin with Greenleaf Bank, not to pay debt, to hide gambling losses. We have proof." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Thunder rolled in the distance. The rain came harder, streaking the windshield. On the dashboard, the silver compass trembled, its needle fixed toward north. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lost. My father's voice seemed to echo through the storm, steady and certain. "Keep going, Greta. You're on the right path." The ambush came on a Monday. I was walking toward the operating room when the hospital lobby froze around a television. My stepfather's face filled the screen, his tone dripping with wounded sincerity as he told the world that his stepdaughter had turned against her own mother for money. He said I'd sued them over a cabin I didn't even use, that I lived far away, too successful to care about family. I didn't move. The nurses stared. Someone whispered a question I didn't answer. I reached over and turned the TV off. The silence that followed felt surgical, clean, cold, final. By afternoon, social media was on fire. My mother's post came next. "I only wish my children could find peace. Just that. No explanation, no truth. It was enough to make me the villain." Amanda called, sharp and fast. "Don't respond," she said. "I'll handle the damage." "No," I told her. "We don't fight in their arena." The next day, the local paper in Vermont published Boston doctor sues her family over inheritance cabin. Comment sections bloomed with judgment. A stranger wrote that I was worse than a thief. The hospital director summoned me. His office was too bright, his words too careful. "We think it's best you take a temporary leave," he said, "for the hospital's reputation." I nodded. The truth doesn't matter in a storm this loud. That night, I watched Martin's interview replay online. 70,000 views, everyone a needle. I shut the laptop. The compass in my pocket trembled faintly, its sound barely there, but real enough to feel like a heartbeat. The next morning, Amanda's email arrived, an audio file. Martin's voice, calm and smug. "I signed for her. She's in Boston. It's fine." I played it again and again. Every repetition carved away the last of my hesitation. My hands were steady, the way they are before a major incision. "Good," I whispered. Time to cut out the disease. A week later, I drove north through freezing rain. Vermont was gray and empty, the lake still and watching. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered, almost shy beneath the weight of winter. The door was locked, but the old brass key still turned easily. Inside, dust muted the air. I walked through each room, flashlight sweeping over furniture that belonged to a life long gone. In my father's study, a hairline crack ran down the wall behind his favorite painting. My instincts took over. I pressed. The plaster gave, and a slip of paper fell to the floor, a yellowed envelope sealed in red wax, for Greta, written in my father's hand. I broke the seal and read slowly. The cabin held in a private trust under my name, the document overriding all future transfers. His signature, his notary's stamp, unmistakable. I sank to the floor. He had known this would happen. He had built protection not for the property, but for me. The tears came quietly, grief, pride, love, all tangled together. I took a picture and sent it to Amanda. Her reply came within minutes. "This changes everything. It's legal proof. He's finished." I set the phone down and looked around the room. The old desk, the wooden chair. My fingers brushed the surface, catching on something rough. A small word carved beneath the varnish. Stronghold. A laugh escaped me, half broken, half whole. Not the Reddick Lake estate. It had never stopped being his stronghold. Outside, the rain thickened into a downpour, steady and relentless. I stood at the window, compass in hand, the needle steady for the first time. For years, I'd been searching for direction. Now I had it. North wasn't a place. It was the truth, finally pointing back to me. The cafe in the Burlington Hotel was nearly empty, the kind of quiet that hums before a storm. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. Outside, snow drifted over the streets in slow, reluctant spirals. The last storm of the season. The light on the marble table gleamed pale and sterile, reminding me of an operating room. That thin line between life and death. Truth and denial. Martin arrived right on time, coat pressed, smile too tight to hold. He sat down without asking. His voice came soft. Rehearsed. We've all made mistakes. Greta, if you drop the case, I'll split the money. There's no need for court. Families shouldn't humiliate each other. I set the cup aside and met his eyes. You still think this is about money? That cabin was my father's promise, not your asset. He tried to laugh, but it cracked. The press will destroy you, he warned. Think about your mother. I opened my laptop, pressed play. His own voice filled the air. I signed for her. She's in Boston. The color drained from his face. His hands shook. He muttered something about misunderstanding, but it was too late. I closed the laptop gently. Tomorrow, the court will hear you too, I said. I don't want you in prison. Martin, I just want my father to rest in peace. As I walked out, the snow outside had stopped. The air felt clean, stripped of noise. That night, I slept without dreams. When dawn came, sunlight spilled across the compass on my nightstand, its needle fixed, unwavering, pointing true north. The courtroom was packed, cameras flashing, voices low with anticipation. I walked in wearing a black suit, the silver compass pinned to my lapel, catching the light. Martin sat pale and trembling, his fingers drumming the table. Clarissa kept her eyes down. My mother sat behind them, tears already forming. Amanda rose, steady and sharp. She presented the evidence one piece at a time, the recording of Martin's confession, the mortgage papers, and finally my father's letter. The prosecutor read it aloud. This property was built for my daughter's peace. Any attempt to sell it is a breach of trust and honor. The room fell silent. My mother's sobs broke it. Clarissa fled before the verdict came. Martin only stared at the floor as the judge's voice rang clear. Guilty of property fraud and forgery, restitution, and 2 years probation. The gavel struck once. My mother whispered, "Can you forgive me?" I shook my head softly. "You don't need my forgiveness. Just stop letting others choose right and wrong for you." Outside, reporters swarmed. One asked if I felt victorious. No, I said, just peaceful. My father's voice was finally heard. Months later, the snow was gone. I drove back to Vermont along the narrow trail that curved through the trees until the lake came into view. The cabin waited at the edge of the water, my father's stronghold once again. When I opened the door, the air was thick with pine and old wood. I cleaned each corner, replaced the curtains, and dusted the desk where my father used to write. On it, I placed the silver compass, steady and bright, beside a framed copy of his letter. By afternoon, Amanda arrived with a bottle of red wine and a paper bag of bread. We sat on the porch, watching sunlight scatter across the lake. "You found your north," she said. "Not just north." I answered, "The whole sky." We laughed quietly, the wind rustling through the pines. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. "I left Martin, staying with a friend. I just wanted you to know." I typed back, "Thank you. Live honestly." The sun dipped low, turning the lake gold. The compass needle stopped trembling, perfectly still. "Peace isn't a gift," I whispered. "It's something you defend." The next day, I signed the papers creating the Sullivan Trust Scholarship. My father's legacy wasn't the cabin. It was everything that would grow from it. As I locked the door, the forest glowed ahead, a path of light leading home. For the first time, I no longer needed the compass.